So welcome everyone. Hopefully you're all staying warm on this blustery day. Personally, if it snows, I wouldn't be opposed to it because I'd rather have something, out of all this cold. But it is what it is. So my name is Dr. Nate Poling. I'm a senior instructional consultant here at the Center for Teaching Excellence, and I see some familiar faces in the crowd here. But today we will be talking about building and sustaining high-performing project groups. And one of the reasons why I think this is an important topic is because I don't know about you, but when I taught undergraduates and graduate students, a lot of times I ran into similar issues. My students didn't know how to work in groups. I would put them in groups and they would seemingly do fine, but then kind of implode at the end of the semester. I see some nods in the crowd. And then I realized, I think one of the most important things is a lot of times we don't necessarily teach our students how to work in groups. We've assumed that they've picked up those skills. So, the reason I designed this session is because in my own personal and professional experience, I made some assumptions that really, ended up in some relatively awkward times when it came to helping my student groups, both at the graduate and undergraduate level. So without further ado, it's a jam-packed session. There are two outcomes. We want to help you identify ways to proactively address common challenges and roadblocks students face while working in project groups. So I am looking at semester-long or half-semester-long project groups, not just casual groupings during a class period. We want to help you identify best practices of forming, supporting, and assessing project groups, and we'll share a lot of resources with you when it comes to that. But like I said, we are recording this session. We won't be recording the breakout room session and discussion, but we will be recording this content portion. First things first, I want to make sure that the session is an opportunity for you to learn, but also an opportunity to affirm what you're already doing. So, some of the stuff we go over today might be new, might not be new. But definitely, I hope that you'll get some value out of what we work with today. So learning and affirming is the words of the day. First things first, before we go any further, I want to ask all of you to take out a piece of paper, a pencil or a pen, or if you have a device that you want to, bring it up on another screen. But I think it's very important from a teaching and learning perspective for us to kind of actually interact with the learning outcomes in the session. So I'm going to ask you to keep track throughout the course of the session, 3 interesting things that you've learned or that have been affirmed for you. So, what are 3 interesting things that you have learned or have been affirmed for you? Secondly, I want you to take note of 2 things that you still have questions about or that you want to research. So 3 things that you find interesting, 2 things that you still have questions about that you want to research, and then finally 1 thing that you want to take out of the session and actually implement. I think that's the value added part of the session, as I aim to kind of give you something that you can actually use, whether it's this semester, next semester, or whatnot, but I want you to be able to take something away that you can use. So this is also a good activity to get your students to pay attention more in class, I found, 3, 2, 1 kind of activity. But yeah, if you would take notes, we'll debrief a little bit towards the end of the session. A little bit about the breakdown of this 90-minute session. We'll probably spend about 30 minutes actually working in groups and doing some activities. We're going to spend about 30 minutes analyzing, group work, how your group work went. And then we're also going to go over some tools, practical tools. I've got a Google folder that we're just going to go, down the list and show you some of my favorite tools that I've gathered over the years. So with that being said, let's go ahead and continue. So right now we are going to go ahead and start off with a small group shipwreck activity. Some of you may have done this before. Humor me and have some fun again. But I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here. This is where I'm going to give you about 20 minutes in groups to kind of wrestle with some things, and then we're going to debrief it. So the reason I put group work in here is not to make you uncomfortable or make you have to go into breakout rooms. It's to actually model some of the things that I want to share with you, some of the tools later on. So I have a Google folder here that should be accessible to everyone. Please let me know if you are not able to access that. I see some nods, that's great. So what I'm asking you to do, and I'm going to go ahead and bring up my share screen again. There we go. In the Google folder, you should see something like this. You should see number 1, Lost at Sea team building activity. If you could go ahead and please download a copy for yourself. So don't open it as a Google Doc. If you could download a copy for yourself, that would be great. And within this document, I'm going to go over your tasks as a group. So you should have been able to download the file. Please download your own copy of it. And the tasks that I'm going to ask you to do is, as a group, you've chartered a yacht with a few friends. You might be in groups of more than 3 for a holiday trip of a lifetime across the Atlantic Ocean or Pacific, depending on where you want to start off on. Because none of you have any previous sailing experience, you have hired an experienced skipper and 2-person crew. Unfortunately, in a mid-Atlantic or Pacific, fierce fire breaks out on the ship's galley, and the skipper and crew have been lost while trying to fight the blaze. So that's not good. Much of the yacht is destroyed and is slowly sinking. Your location is unclear because vital navigational and radio equipment have been damaged in the fire. Your best estimate is that you are many hundreds of miles or kilometers from the nearest landfall. You and your friends have managed to save 15 items, so 15 total items, undamaged and intact after the fire. In addition, you have salvaged a 4-man or 4-person rubber life craft and a box of matches. Your task is to rank the 15 items in terms of their importance for you as you wait to be rescued. Place the number 1 by the most important item, and followed by the number 2 until you have ranked all the items. So this should be a Word document that you can actually put your ranking in. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do as a group. I'm going to give you about 20 minutes to kind of do this. Your first task is, as an individual in each of your groups, do your individual ranking. And then once you have finished as a group, each individual in the group has finished ranking, what I'm going to ask you to do is come up with a team ranking. Okay, as a team, what can you agree upon on your ranking? And we're gonna, continue going through this as we go through the session. So I am gonna go ahead and stop sharing. Do I have any questions about the activity before I put you in your groups?
Is there a document that we're using for the objects, or?
Yes, it should be in the chat here. Let me go ahead and put it here. And it should be first on that list of and in your group you can share a screen. So if one of you doesn't have the document, you can still have it up, but that Google Drive should give you access to that document. All right, let me go ahead and have about 20 minutes to kind of do this. So again, first things first, rank it individually in the group. And then once everyone has done that, go ahead and rank it as a team. So I'm going to go ahead and put you into the groups. I'm going to circulate between the groups. Let's go ahead and go. I'll see you in about 20 minutes. Debrief a little bit. So you all did the shipwreck activity, but why is it important for our students to be able to work in teams and groups? Why is it important for them to buy in or for them to care? And I don't know about you, but sometimes I've had a hard time getting my students to actually care about group work because they've always had not so fun times. They don't necessarily understand that the world works in groups. And the other thing that I really wanted to kind of share is, I don't know if you're familiar with the EyeShaped Learner or the T-shaped learner, but a lot of times, employers are looking at people that have, broad general knowledge or broad skills. So in that breadth of knowledge on the horizontal axis here, not only breadth of knowledge, but it's also those transferable skills that the university and that employers and that military, government, healthcare, whatever, want and need. A lot of times our students might be too focused on the specialist, the little chunk there, content. That's fine, but it's better for our students to be more well-rounded when they're good at one thing really deeply, but they're also good on a broad swath of skills. And that's what employers are looking for. So this is what I share with my students when I say I'm assigning group work, both at the graduate and undergraduate level, because employers most likely are going to teach you some of the specific ways that they want you to do a job, but they want you to be coachable. They want you to be a team player. So it's that crossbar there that I think is very key. I wanted to share that with you because I find it helpful when I share it with my students. The other thing that I wanted to talk about here was, the university learning outcomes. I also connected to university learning outcomes because getting students to buy into the effectiveness and the value of group work can be a little challenging at times. So again, practice personal and social responsibility, social, cultural, global competence, work collaboratively, communicate effectively. All of these are directly, related to the learning outcomes here at A&M, the undergraduate learning outcomes. So this helps get people on the same page. And it's also important for us as instructors to kind of remember this too. Does anyone want to tell me what these are, either via the voice or via the chat? Do you know what these are?
Meerkats.
Meerkats.
Meerkats, yes. Why am I showing you pictures of meerkats? They're cute and cuddly, but why else am I showing you these?
They live in colonies.
Yes, they live in colonies. They look out for each other. So they're the ultimate team. And this is what we want our students to be. We want them to kind of say, teamwork, this is how it all works, Unfortunately, though, a lot of times what we see or what they experience is a floating dumpster fire. And, this is their perception of it. So how can we help them move on from this experience and, really kind of buy into the group work and understand? I thought this was humorous, on the left-hand side, what group projects are supposed to teach you, and then what group projects taught me. And a lot of our students are coming in with this mindset of, trust no one. Excuse me, at A&M especially, a lot of our students are high achieving. So they're used to doing, solo work or being successful by themselves. And sometimes they might see their classmates as a drag or a hindrance. And when that happens, you're not going to have a high-performing team or a high-performing group. So we're going to talk a little bit about dynamics, personality, and things like that. But it's important to kind of keep these in mind because before we even assign group work, there are a lot of different factors we might want to kind of consider. So I think one of the biggest things that I wanted to share with you is that assigning group work is more than just saying, hey, here's a group, here are the groups, or form your groups, and here's the task. I want this XYZ by the middle of the semester, or by the end of the semester. And, I've observed classes where group work has been assigned that way. And I've been assigned in groups and courses like that. And I can tell you that those probably never end well. So the first thing I wanted to really focus on was the fact that facilitating effective semester-long or even year-long group work is all about infrastructure. It's all about creating something or a framework that's robust, that has integrity, internal structural integrity, because you want a system that works for all your students. And I think keeping careful mind of the infrastructure that you create will really help facilitate the group work as you move on. So infrastructure is one thing that I want you to kind of take note of. The other thing, and we all see this, is failing to plan is planning to fail. And I actually show this to my students. They roll their eyes, but I do spend a significant amount of time on the front end of trying to get them to buy in and to put value in group work. And like I said before, front loading a lot of the support I found in my own personal experience to be very helpful, because I have had the experience where a lot of the work has come at the back end when I'm trying to salvage groups or help groups stop imploding. So it is worth the time and effort to front load some of your guidance, your support. A lot more work, takes a lot more organization, but I think the payoff is well worth it. Another thing that I like to keep in mind is that a lot of times group work, we see it as a product. Our students see it as a product, but I like to see it as a process. It's not only a process, we're dealing with people. And we're not only dealing with people, we're trying to produce a product. And I stole this from industry, but I think it's a good illustration for us to apply in the classroom, because if we want high performing groups, if we want performance to be at the center, we have to have a playbook. And a lot of times our students go into group work with no playbook, or we haven't provided them a playbook, or we provide them a playbook that's incomplete, or a playbook that they just ignore. So I think that these 4 Ps, or 5 Ps when you look at it, are very integral when it comes to maintaining and building and supporting groups throughout the semester. The other thing that I share with my students, and I share sometimes at the professional development sessions that I do, is encourage students, participants to take a SOAR approach. A lot of times we take a sort of a glass half empty approach, and that's a lot of times what our students take into the group experience. I had bad experiences, so this one's equal as bad. I tell my students, you can hate group work, but let's go into this one looking at it from a SOAR perspective. What are our group strengths? What are our opportunities? What do we aspire to do? How can we find the best results? So actually just going over this with them is key, because our 18 to 23-year-olds don't have a lot of real world group experience. And the only group experience they might have had would be negative in the classroom. So I encourage them to take a SOAR approach. The other thing that I really want to highlight is taking a learn framework. So in this group experience, I would ask my students to learn, listen with an open mind, engage and participate. Don't just sit on the sidelines expecting everyone else to carry your weight. And then again, I think one of the hardest things for me personally, working in groups and professionally, is assume positive intent. A lot of times we assume negative intent, and that really can be a drag on a lot of performing groups. Respect differences, that's a big key. We'll get into that in just a little bit. And then network with others. This one is important because you want to be able to kind of learn from each other. So the SOAR and learn are 2 things that I really want to highlight, because those are easy, low-hanging fruit that can really help get your students and you on the same page. I'm going to pause here for a second. Any questions or comments that you would like to make in the chat or in voice?
Yes, Nate, you mentioned a lot of things that are, when you talk, for instance, about infrastructure, could you be more specific or give some examples? What do you exactly mean about that?
Thank you, Gonzalo. We will actually get to that later in the session. I think I've given you in just a little bit a big toolbox to build that infrastructure, but I'll explain that step by step as we go through. Great question, then. All right, so SOAR, learn. The other thing that I found, and I'm speaking from just my personal experience in working with faculty when they have groups, is personality is one of the biggest things that causes groups to fail or to sputter. Everyone has a different personality. And sometimes it's the instructor's personality that actually might be the disruptive factor. And a lot of times we don't think about that, but if we approach people from a certain perspective and they have very different personalities than us, then there's a situation where sparks can fly. So there's no one size fits all answer. Everyone has their personality. We don't have to like their personality, but we have to work effectively in a group. So that's what I tell my students. I tell my students that you don't have to like each other, but I'm here to help you, do the best you can, and you're going to have to help each other. So I think having them understand that their group mates are very different is key here too. So I think that this is part of the infrastructure and setting groups up, Gonzalo, is even just giving them this mental model before we even start. Because I don't know about you, but a lot of times when I was in group work in my PhD or undergrad, the first thing that the instructor did was get in groups, here's your task, and now go. And there was no infrastructure. It was 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. So I felt unsupported, my group felt unsupported. So this is part of that build up to that infrastructure. So the next thing that we're going to do right now is you're going to not be in groups, but if you could go back to that, that folder that I have here. I'm going to go ahead and put that back in the chat. You might want to keep this drive open too. You should see, and I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I'm going to stop sharing. you should see in the folder, you should see the personality test here. So let me go ahead and bring that up. So you did the lost at sea, but go ahead and click on the personality test. I'm going to give you about maybe 5-10 minutes to do this. So it's fun thing, we'll debrief, but go ahead and download a copy of this like we did with the other thing, and then you should be able to fill it out. And I like using this personality test. I've used it with my undergraduates and graduate students because it helps them understand who they are. And it isn't culturally specific. It's not what TV character are you. It's more generic. So, it's gonna kind of categorize you as a lion, an otter, a golden retriever, or a beaver. They're cute and cuddly animals, but they do give us some good insight into who our students are and who our group mates are. So if you could go ahead and spend about 5-7 minutes filling that out, we will go ahead and come back in 5-7 minutes. All right, so let's go ahead and reconvene. Like everything that I've done in the session, there's a very direct intent purpose for this. So take a look at who you are. How accurate was it for you? Accurate, not accurate, ballpark? Go ahead and put that in the chat, and let's see how we do here. Oh, and go ahead and let us share with you who you are. Are you an otter? Are you a golden retriever? Painfully accurate, accurate. Okay. So go ahead. How many otters do we have in here? Go ahead and type otter. Okay. Otter with lion, otter. Haven't seen any lions yet. Lion, golden retriever. Okay. Accurate. Lion, beaver. Okay. Otter and lion. Very interesting. Golden retriever. Okay. Any more? Otter. Okay. We have a lot of otters. David, I think you make a very good point. Your personality has changed over the last 10 years. I think that's very important to think about too, because sometimes our students' personalities might change over the course of their first year here to second year or third year. So that's something that I'm glad you brought up. Katie, you're a beaver and a lion. Okay. Susan, beaver. Sunmi, you're an otter. Okay. So a lot of otters, a lot of golden retrievers. So let's go ahead and move a little deeper into this. So I guess my question would be, think about your own, leadership and personality style. We were going to do a leadership inventory, but I decided not to. I'll share that with you in just a little bit. But think about your personality style. How did this influence the dynamics and effectiveness of your own group? And that's a question that I pose to my students too, because what happens if you have 3 lions and a golden retriever in a group of 4? What would happen if you have 3 lions and a golden retriever in a group of 4?
A lot of competition. Yeah.
A lot of competition between the lions, but what happens to the golden retriever?
They end up doing all the work while the lions were arguing.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
so that's a very common occurrence when it comes to undergraduate groups. But if you help them understand and pinpoint some of the problems, and before they even begin working, that could be helpful.
Nate, I've got a question.
Yeah.
One of my questions was, how do we make sure that the groups are diverse? And I was thinking of using something along the strengths quest lines. But could you use this pre-group creation and then ask them to create groups of the 4 different animals? So we do have that balance. Would that be appropriate?
Well, it depends on the purpose of your groups, and we'll go over group composition just a little bit. For me, when I create groups, I actually keep them completely random. And the reason I do that is because, and I share this with my students, I say, I can place you in specially designed groups that would work if it fits my purpose. But in general, when you start a job, you don't get to pick your teammates. When your job puts you, your boss puts you on a team, you're going to have to be able to work with that team. You can't say, boss, I don't like X, number person, I want this person. So that generally goes well because they know that they won't be able to pick their teammates. there is times when you could, make your groups more deliberate, especially if you want balance. Susan, that's a great idea too. I think, get buy-in. One of the challenges of forming groups, and a faculty member actually brought this up to my attention, I hadn't thought about it, is if you choose the groups and you're the architect of the groups, sometimes instructor bias can be perceived by students. The instructor put all the favorite students in one group, or the instructor blah, 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 so there's a lot of different ins and outs. There's no one size fits all, one best way. You can have random groups, you can have them choose their groups, you can have some sort of strengths finder or personality test kind of deal. But for me, simplicity's sake, and for more real world application, I tend to just go with, fully random. But great question. So I'm thinking about your shipwreck activity, and you don't have to share, but did you notice anybody who was more of a lion take charge? Did you notice some people that might have just stayed in the background and gone with the flow? Did you notice some people more engaged than others? Those are just things to note. We're not going to go through each group and talk about that, but I mean, think about it. Did you have a golden retriever? Did you have 3 golden retrievers and a lion? Did you have a beaver? Did you have a group of otters so they didn't complete the task because they were too busy, having fun or goofing off? So those are things that I like to think about when I do groups, because they're furry animals. We're not getting into, are you an ENTJ or are you a this or that? This is just animals. And in general, this tool is way less intimidating than one of those scientific psychological metrics. But so I think Gonzalo had this point earlier of infrastructure. This is part of the infrastructure that I build in when I set up my groups for teamwork. Let's see here. So Michael, you have a question. How do we approach neurodiverse individuals? I know computing values them, but likely. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll up here. I know. And in your case, it would be the instructor. If you know that you have a lot of neurodiverse people in your class, maybe you form the groups, or maybe you let them form the groups.
Well, no, what I was bringing up was that a lot of times when I say computing, I mean like the industry, like they make out calls and say, we'll take neurodiverse, we want neurodiverse, but I have a strong feeling they're putting those people in positions where they're not working in teams as much, or the way they interact has been very modified. Yeah. But I was just wondering how do we take that right? Because I think a lot of times too, neurodiverse can cause conflict. And I see that in some of the committees I'm on in my department. And there are some people I suspect, I'm not positive, right? Because I don't just go up and ask people, are you, are you on the autism spectrum or something like that? But a lot of times when I perceive that, I put in my mind, it's like, that's going to change how they behave. And then I take it in as being appropriate for that person versus letting it bother me. But I don't think students are necessarily going to have that.
And I think you bring up a very good point. It's one of those things that we want to make sure that everyone's more comfortable in groups. And there's no way to make sure that every person in a group feels most comfortable that they can be. What I would like to share with students is, I understand that you have a whole bunch of different, facets of your identity and diversity, but the real world out there is going to expect you to, work some, way, shape, or form in a group. And if you end up at a workplace that is able to kind of, cater to your strengths and your identity, that's great. But unfortunately, in the vast majority of jobs out there, we are required and asked to kind of work with diverse groups. So, just this activity can really help with helping students understand that their teammates are people and that there are a whole bunch of different aspects to them. So, but great point here.
I wanted to share real quick something that I'm implementing this semester. I don't know if it's working. First of all, initially we defined some sort of appreciative agreements as a collect, group, as a whole class, and we worked, into sessions about this. Okay, these are our agreements, and I keep the students in groups of 4 for about 3 to 4 weeks, and then they will reshuffling all those groups. So they get to work with different people, and they are created randomly initially, and then I'm changing the groups.
So, I've heard a lot about that in engineering, especially where, you're in a group and then you shift on to a different group. And I think that's totally appropriate. But I do think those initial groups, when you set it up, I think it's key that they understand the dynamics, because that helps them integrate the new groups later on. So I still think that a lot of things that we talk about today are going to be pertinent to that. And also some of the documentation and tools that I'm going to show you will be helpful with groups at any stage, I think. So, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of share with you some of the approaches that I've had with group work. Now, does it always work? No, it doesn't always work. Sometimes I've still had to step in, but I'll show you some tools that I've used in the past. Let's go ahead and continue here. Before we kind of go into who our students are, we want to kind of think about who we are. Because our students aren't necessarily like us. Our students might not want to become a professor or an instructor. They might want to do something completely different. They might have very different identities than who we are. So we need to be mindful of that, I think. And that's an important thing. So you probably have seen this, and I actually share this with my students because I think that self-reflection can really help our students both professionally and personally. And I share this with my students in some way, shape, or form, and say that your group mates there's many facets to their identity, just as there's many facets to your identity. And as instructors, I think it's important for us, our classrooms, our learning environments, to kind of embrace diversity and inclusion. And this is one way that I try to get to my students and to the faculty that I work with, that this is one way that we can be a little bit more inclusive. You might not agree with everybody. You might not get along with everybody because you're a lion, but we still have to kind of push towards a common goal. So again, I think that this wheel is a great thing. And actually spending time going over it can really help students key in on the fact that we are different, but we are actually probably more similar in some regards than different. So again, having that conversation, I think, is actually pertinent even in a engineering or science course, because in science and engineering and technology, you have to work in groups a lot. You have to work in high performing teams. So I don't think that this stuff only belongs in a liberal arts or a sociology or education classroom. I think that this helps groups across the board. So this is another thing that I use. So we're building that infrastructure as we go along here. Now that we have a little bit more data from your own experience with the shipwreck, and your animal activity, it's time to debrief here. So I guess my next thing here is, if you go back to your team building activity, you should have your individual ranking. You should have your team ranking. And now what I'm going to show you is the actual ranking that the Coast Guard has. And if you might want to fill this in into one of yours. So then we'll debrief your team experience. But according to the US Coast Guard, the shaving mirror is number 1. Let's see here. The 10-liter can of oil or petrol is number 2. The 25-liter container of water is number 3. The Army rations is number 4. Number 5 is the plastic sheeting. 6 was the boxes of chocolate bars. 7 was an ocean fishing kit and pole. 8 was the nylon rope. 9 was, let me see here, 9 was the floating seat cushion. 10 was the can of shark repellent. 11 was the bottle of rubbing alcohol, in this scenario, the version, or the 160 proof rum in the version that I gave you. And 12 was the small transistor radio. Maps of the Pacific Ocean was 13. 14 was mosquito netting. And 15 was the sextant. So going back to your individual, your group rankings, how did it compare to what the Coast Guard was really looking at? Were you as an individual more close, or as a group, were you closer to the Coast Guard's ranking? Does anyone in the group want to share real quickly?
Just, I got a question though. Why did we change the alcohol from rubbing alcohol to rum?
Oh, well, this is just a different version of the
I
same.
know, it just was.
But I
Might
did
have
this one.
affected something.
Well, I did this one with I did the 160 proof rum with my 18-year-old freshman last year, and that went kind of funny. But anyways, good. So Becky, you say your group was closer. Is that the same for all the groups? You look at your sheet. See some nods. Okay. So this is a good activity. It's a team icebreaker. It's Cynthia, you missed the purpose of the mirror. That's common. This is a good icebreaker, but it's not only an icebreaker or an icebreaker. What it does is it actually kind of shows my students that going it alone isn't always the most effective way. That the collaborative power of groups helps us make better decisions. And it does so in a way that's hypothetical. It's not academic. It's non-threatening, and we talk about how their personalities, what animal type influences. Oh well, Nate, you're a lion. It was very obvious because you wouldn't let David over there, who's a beaver, get a word in. And this is how we can hash out some of our differences. Now, is that gonna make all our group experiences great? No, but it's going to give our students a little bit more empowerment when it comes to taking responsibility for their own group work. Let me go ahead and pause real quick here. Lori, yes, I do have the Google Drive link and I will share that with you afterwards. So walking you through that activity, I found in my own experience that really helps with group cohesion. But I did want to segue into talking about some actual tools that I wanted to share with you in that folder, and then we can have a discussion. But before we move on, any last thoughts, reflections on your group activity, your personality, what we've talked about so far? Has this been helpful? Give me a thumbs up if it's been helpful. It's hard to gauge. Okay, it's hard to gauge your Zoom screens here. All right. Let's go with going back to this area here. I wanted to go step by step through some of this, but let me check and make sure. Yeah, we debriefed. Oh, one other thing before we get to that is I want to talk about conflict. Sorry about that. One of the biggest issues that my groups face is conflict and how students and groups implode. And what I like, this is Tuckman's 5 stages of group development. And I actually go over this with students. Where do you think most of our students' groups fail? What stage do you think they normally fail? Okay, storming. Step 2, performing. Okay. There are many different ways where groups can fail. A lot of times when students don't gel or they don't have any rapport within the group, forming groups they can actually fail there too. Yes, we will give a copy of the PowerPoint and the resources after the session. So I actually go through each of the stages with my students. And say that you will be storming. You will have times when you want to really have a fight. There are going to be times when it's not going to be smooth sailing. How can you, as a group, agree to get through those rough patches? And you really want to get up to the norming or the performing. And a lot of times, at least in my observation in higher ed, we assign groups and then we expect them to be at the performing stage already. So Gonzalo, back to your point of the infrastructure, it's how do we get students from the forming to the performing? Another thing that I wanted to kind of talk about is this is Thomas Kilman conflict kind of scale. Oh, thank you, Jane. I actually do this with faculty groups. It's very interesting. So if you look at the scale here, or the matrix, you see a cooperativeness scale on the bottom, and then assertiveness scale on the other axis. So if you look at the generally 5 types of groups here, these are generally the top 5 types of groups that you can find in your classroom, and this is what I've experienced too. I found groups that are very unassertive and uncooperative. They avoid the problem. They avoid conflict. They just go nowhere. Similarly, when you have a very highly assertive group, but a very uncooperative group, you have competing. So if you have a bunch of lions that aren't willing to kind of compromise, this is something that might happen. When you have a accommodating group, I see this a lot. Cooperativeness is very high, but assertiveness is very low. This is where you get one group member that ends up carrying the team, because that one person accommodates until they sort of get taken advantage of, or everybody accommodates, and it's not a very healthy dynamic there either. Compromising is in the middle, and normally you would think that compromise would be good, and generally it is. But I have seen in small group work sometimes where compromising is bad, when people compromise on the quality of their work, or people compromise on their group effectiveness. So ultimately, what we really want our students to get to is the highly cooperative, highly assertive, so that people feel comfortable making decisions and speaking up, in a proactive manner. So collaborating is what we're looking at. But even showing students this image has helped me with student groups, because they haven't thought about this before, and a lot of instructors I talk to haven't thought of things like this before. So now I want to go ahead and get out of here real quick. I want to get out and go back. This is where I really want to kind of switch gears and take you through some of the practical things. So if you have this link, go ahead and open it up. So you've done the personality test, you've done all of that. Effective use of group work. This is a nice resource for you to look at. Gives you a whole bunch of different things to do and things to consider. How do you form teams? What's the best way? Random assignment or letting the group? This is going to help you kind of decide that. How do you help students go through conflicts? So this is a nice resource on that. It gives you a nice checklist. How do you resolve the conflict? And this is the leadership self-assessment document that I was going to have you do, but we're going to run out of time. I actually have my students do this too. And some students say, well, Nate, Dr. Nate, I'm not going to be a leader. Well, the problem is that, you might not have a say in that. Your boss might say, you're going to be the leader of this project, now lead your team. So also understanding what type of leader you are is going to be very important. And I think leadership is key in getting students to kind of buy into this, because, on the job application, when was the last time that you led a team? Leadership is one of those intangibles on that crossbar that people in industry, government, nonprofits are looking for. So I have my students take this in addition to the animals. So these Word documents, I'm going to go by very directly here. I think one of the most interesting things here is this team equity charter. And all of these documents come from the Worcester Polytechnic Institute, WPI. And I don't know if you know anything about their curriculum or the way that they do things. Is very interesting. All of their assessment, all of their classes, all of their assignments are via group work. So they've come up with a whole bunch of nice kind of different examples of how to get groups to work together. So this would be a sample team equity charter. So they're looking at broad team goals. What are the measurable team goals? The team member assets. This gets into You know, what does each member bring to the team? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? You know, it's looking a little deeper than just what kind of animal you are. What are the personal and professional goals for each of the students? What are the individual commitments that each student is willing to do? You know, having students create something like this and fill it in actually helps with accountability. Because if you have an issue at the end of the semester, or towards the end of the semester, well, you know, how did you handle this as a group? You've got a paper trail at least. How do we handle concerns? What are the team roles? So I like this one a lot. I'm gonna go ahead and exit out of this one. Another very similar thing would be the team asset chart. You know, of the 5 people in your group, who are the ones that are best with PowerPoint? Who are the best with Excel? Who are the best with presenting? You know, you can help them kind of find a skills-based approach to their groups. The team contract is another one. And, you know, there are many examples of this out on the internet, but again, what's your team name? What are the goals? What are the expectations of everyone? I think expectations are key. So a lot of times different students come into the group with different expectations, and maybe the instructor has different expectations. So getting everyone on the same page is very important. What are the policies and procedures that your group will create to handle late work, differences, conflict, missed meetings? What is the disciplinary structure within reason that your group is going to adhere to? And this serves several purposes. For me, I don't want every one of my 15 groups in a class come to me complaining about X, Y, or Z. What I do is I say, okay, well, we all had this team charter, you all signed it. You all kind of presented that this is the way that you're going to handle your conflict. So go ahead and go back to that charter and follow that procedure. So I kick it back to them before they bring it back to me, because I don't want to spend my entire semester trying to handle their groups. It's one of those things that helps empower the student, puts more responsibility on the student, and instead of me pushing or pulling them, they're hopefully pushing or pulling themselves. Now, are there times I need to step in when it escalates? Of course, but what I'm trying to do is triage that. I'm trying to reduce the amount of group tension and the number of problems that come to me. So that's something that I try to do. And Susan, yep, I agree. It teaches conflict management. So what are the consequences to X, Y, or Z? And then signatures. I know that they're young adults, but it is something that that they need to kind of look at. One other thing is, oh, that's not what I want to do. Let's go back. Sorry about that. I think, yeah. So that was the team charter. So what I ask all my students to do as part of a gradable kind of packet, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now because we can go ahead and have a conversation. When I have a group project that's over an entire semester, I teach project management. What I do is I have them have the first submission is a personality test, a leadership, a self-analysis, a group analysis. I also have them do a team contract and a charter. And then I also have them draft their own conflict resolution plan. Because I found, at least, you know, having them with you know, giving them space to kind of create their own, you know, gives a little bit more buy-in. Of course, I have my own conflict resolution plan that if conflict arises between them, then I can kind of step in. But those are generally some things that I actually, you know, take a grade on, because when I have groups that start to fail, then I say, go back to your charter, go back to remember when we went over X, Y, or Z. And that usually resolves itself pretty quickly. So I help try to make my groups self-sufficient, self-policing, and self kind of responsible. Does it always work? No. But by building this infrastructure, like I said before, building the framework and helping groups understand who they're working with and how they're going to work has been very instrumental in helping me, at least, achieve higher achieving groups over the course of an entire semester. So, all right, so we are out of time. I want to thank you all for coming. Please have a wonderful weekend. and stay warm. Hopefully you were able to take something useful out of this, but I wish you the best of the luck as we continue the semester. So have a happy weekend, everyone.